Welcome to the Balanced Hustle podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Sherman, fitness coach for burnt out perfectionists. If you're ready to break free from overwhelm, simplify your nutrition, and make fitness finally work for you instead of against you, you're in the right place. Each week, we'll dive into easy strategies to balance your health with your busy life. Let's hustle for balance, not burnout. Grab a seat and let's dive in. Hello and welcome to my new podcast. It's so crazy to say that I have a podcast now, but I think this means that I officially do. I was going to record yesterday and I was very excited. It was a Sunday. Today's Monday that I'm recording, and I had my new mic and my new laptop and I got everything all hooked up, and then I spent about 3 hours with my husband trying to figure out how to not make this sound staticky when I talked. It took three hours, but we finally figured it out. I think my computer was brand new. It needed some updates, and we played around with some different recording softwares, but I think we've got it now. So now I officially am starting the podcast. This is still some pretty messy action, though. I don't have a name at this point for the podcast. I am just going with it because that is how I learned that you have to get things done. That is how things actually happen. So at the time that you're hearing this, I'm assuming I will have a name. I'm assuming I will have learned how to post this on whichever podcast platform you're listening to it on. And I may have an intro, hopefully, something like that. We're not too worried about it here. We're just worried about getting something done. So that is, the main goal of today. Let's get this first podcast out of the way. It can only get better from here. But I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad that you're joining. And today's topic of discussion is, how the heck did I get here to be podcasting in the first place? And again, it was through messy action like what I'm doing today. So I wanted to tell you a little bit of my backstory and kind of let you know where I've come from, what's brought me to becoming a fitness coach, and how I ultimately broke free from a life that I was living where I was very burnt out. I was not feeling like I was following my dreams, into this life now where I am coaching fabulous women all the time to reach their fitness goals, to escape burnout themselves, to make nutrition simple, and just kind of where I came from. So initially, I did not ever plan on entering the fitness field, I should say. I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I was younger. I was kind of lost in high school. I was really good at school, so I had that going for me. I got good grades. I was really good, and I still am, at being very organized. So getting my homework done on time. I loved, making spreadsheets and organizational things and writing papers and reading. I just loved checking items off a list. I loved planning. All those types of things. So I was really good at school for those reasons, and I wouldn't even say it's because I was super smart. I was just good at task organization and completion, but I didn't really know what my passion was. So I had multiple avenues that I kind of briefly dabbled in exploring. At one point, I was thinking I would be a baker. I would be a physical therapist. At one point, I wanted to be a prenatal nurse. All different kinds of things. One thing that I kept going back to was working with animals. So I had worked on a dairy farm in high school. My mom got me into that I did 4-H, I was a dairy princess, all of those things. My mom grew up on a dairy farm, so that is how I got into the field, and I wasn't really sure for a while if I wanted to go into agriculture. It was a job that I enjoyed in high school. I fed calves, so My job consisted of, the farm that I worked for was fairly large, and they've grown since, but they had about 500 calves that were anywhere from newborn to 2 months old. And my job on the weekends was feeding calves and delivering calves, watching cows who were close to going into labor, and all those things. So that was my job in high school, and that led me into deciding I wanted to go to college for animal science. Now, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to work on a farm, if I wanted to be a veterinarian, what the heck I wanted to do with that degree, but it was kind of all that I knew, and I knew that I liked it enough to pursue it. And I think there's a lot of pressure on kids today, especially when I was in high school, and maybe more so now, or maybe less so, I'm not sure, but to go to college and to pick a path and a career that you want to do and decide that. And your high school counselors really pressure you to do that. And so for me, I really saw no other option but to go to college. I'd always dreamed about what college would be like. I always wanted to go to college. I just didn't know what for. So because of my ag background, I did end up going to college for animal science. Initially, I signed up to be pre-vet. And thankfully, I changed my mind on that one pretty soon. So I just went for basically the animal science degree that anyone who doesn't want to be a vet does. So that's like if you want to be an animal nutritionist, an ag teacher, just work on a farm, things like that. That is kind of the degree that I went for. There's lots of other fields within that. Those are just to name a few off the top of my head. So I went into that not knowing really what I wanted to do with it, but just knowing it was something that I had a background in, something I felt like I was good at and I enjoyed, and there's always jobs available in ag, right? So when I went into that, I was in college for only 2 years because of all of the AP credits I'd gotten in high school. My burnout really started in high school, and I will talk more about that another day. But I burned myself out in high school getting all those AP credits so that I could complete college faster. So I got my bachelor's degree in 2 years, and it really wasn't enough time for me to explore things, I felt. But it was good for saving money. So I finished in 2 years, and my last semester of college was when the pandemic hit. So we were sent home to finish our classes online, and I never had a graduation. They had promised us that we could come back for the next graduation. However, we were never invited. So ask anybody in my class. That's kind of a touchy subject, but we didn't end up having a graduation, and I kind of just was thrown into things at my last semester in college. So for my degree anyway, something that was beneficial to me was that we did have to complete an internship to get my degree. And I scoured everywhere for internships, and I really wanted something off the farm because that's kind of what I'd done in high school, and I wanted to try something else. I was interested in ag teaching, ag education, or just pursuing another avenue in ag. However, because of COVID, it was really hard to find an internship where I could explore something different. So I ended up getting an internship on a dairy farm. And initially when I got that internship, my view was that it would probably be temporary. I would probably find something else that I liked better. But I did really end up liking that job and the people that I worked for. So I ended up staying there for 2 more years, ultimately. Yeah, it was about 2 years. And my position there was basically the assistant to the herds person. So that job involved a lot. It involved organization of people, of systems within the dairy farm, of herd health. I was the one that if there was a cow that was sick, it would be brought to my attention. I would figure out how to treat it, figure out if the vet needed to be called, things like that. It was a lot of responsibility for someone just out of college. And while I really did like the job and I wanted to do really well at the job, I started to realize over time that it wasn't quite the perfect job for me. And I may not have been as passionate about it as I initially thought that I was. Like, I liked it, but I just was not feeling that passion and that drive that I wanted to. So I did stick it out for quite some time. And about a year, it was about a year before I ended up leaving that job, I was in a situation where I had a coworker who was basically, long story short, very, very awful to me. Worst coworker I've ever had in my whole life. And she was awful. I won't say names, obviously, but she basically, made my life miserable while I was at work, because she was jealous of the position that I was in. And during that time, I ended up getting my personal training certification, basically because I knew that ultimately one of us would have to leave at the end of the day. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew that I just could not go on working with someone like that, and I needed a plan B, right? So I thought of, well, what are my other passions? Do I have any other passions? I didn't have anything when I was in college, but I've always had a background in fitness just from working out myself. It's how I used to deal with stress in high school. I used fitness in college, and I always just thought it was kind of a hobby and just something that I enjoyed doing. But I thought to myself, if I was going to do like my dream job, like something that would be really fun to show up to, something I'd be really passionate about, like what would that be? And I'm like, you know what, a personal trainer sounds like a really cool job. So I took the leap and I signed up for the online course, and I actually ended up completing the certification when we ended up being on a 10-day quarantine because of COVID, and someone that we had connection to who had gotten COVID, and they were fine, but we had to quarantine because we'd been in contact with them. So during that quarantine, I ended up finishing up my certification, passing everything, and then I kind of just had it for a while without doing anything with it. I kind of told myself, like, hey, it's here as my plan B, but if anything, like, I've used this information to better my education about fitness and to kind of better my knowledge of fitness, because fitness is always going to be a part of my life, right? So I didn't use that certification for a long time. That coworker ended up being let go, so I stayed about a year at my job after that because things did get better. But again, I didn't quite have the passion for the job that I wanted to have like I did for fitness. And my strengths were elsewhere. So I did end up leaving that job after, again, about another year because I just felt like someone else could have been better for the job and I wanted to pursue fitness, right? So I ended up starting to coach. And I love coaching. I realized that when I was in my job, my kind of management job on the dairy farm, one of the things that I really enjoyed doing was organization of tasks. I loved organizing tasks, setting up calendars, planning, things like that. And the second thing that I loved was training new team members. I felt like I really was able to thrive when I was helping someone else learn and having that ability to just work with someone else and, kind of feed off of each other. And I really, really loved that. And I think that kind of lended well to becoming a coach. So as of right now, I've actively been coaching for 2 years. I also have a full-time job at a local auction house, which I love. I'm an office administrator there, so I get to do all the organization things that I love to do. And I'm coaching currently as my passion on the side, and I am just loving every minute of it. I'm that weird kid that just loves homework. Like, I love coming up with projects and coming up with new goals and tasks for myself, and like this podcast. I love just adding things like that onto my plate. I don't know why, but I love all those things. I love working with my clients and troubleshooting what they've been struggling with, developing plans that will work for them, and helping them get out of a place of burnout as well. And I will talk about burnout a lot more in this podcast, but it is a place that I know very well. And I just wanted to briefly touch on it today, not get too far into it, and just kind of give you the story of how I got into fitness coaching from a very unconventional background of dairy farming. That's not really a career path that really happens for a lot of people, but my main moral of today's podcast is that saying yes and messy action are mainly what are going to get you places in life. So when I was in that rut during my job, when I was, kind of being bullied by a coworker, I thought about it for maybe a week or so, and then I just signed up to get my certification for personal training. And if I had just let myself sit on that for years and years and years, this just wouldn't have happened. And taking those steps that I kind of just felt were right in my gut are really what got me here today. And I just want to encourage anybody out there that no matter how unconventional it may seem, if there's a path that you want to go down, even if it doesn't really relate to the path that you're on currently, if you know, like, deep in your soul that you are passionate about something, that you want to go for something, or there's just a goal that you want to work towards that seems far away right now, it is possible for you. And all you have to do to start writing that new story for yourself is just to start with the very first step. So if we're going to use the story analogy, it's buying the notebook, it's buying the pen, it's opening up the book, right? Not thinking about everything all at once. When I got my certification, I wasn't even thinking about how I was actually going to use it, how I was going to become a coach. And for me, that was really wild because, like I said, I was always a big planner in high school. I always wanted to know what the next step was. And actually more than that, I always wanted to know what the full plan was. And really, it's just about asking yourself, can I do the first step? Can I do the first thing? And if I can do that, I will figure out the next thing after that. So again, I'm a fitness coach now. So relating this back to fitness, it's not like you need to figure out your whole fitness plan all today and start it tomorrow. It's taking the first step. So do you feel that you need a coach? Okay, your first step is to find somebody that you like. And that's all you need to start with. Then you go from there. Now, say you need to start working out at home. First step, make yourself a space to work out. Don't worry about what the plan is going to be yet. When you're going to do your workouts, you know that you need a space to work out. So you're going to make yourself a little corner in your living room, a little spot in a spare bedroom, something like that. Make yourself the space, then go from there. What are the steps that you can do and that you know how to do that will propel you into the next thing? And that's really how you get started. So just like me starting this podcast today, I figured out I got to buy a microphone, okay? I want good sound quality. That is a priority for me. I'm going to buy a microphone. I'm not going to figure out how to use it and, all the specifications and all the things I need to know about the microphone. I'm going to find someone with a microphone who I trust, that I like, that I've listened to podcasts on, and I'm going to just buy the microphone. I'm going to figure out how to use it later. Then I'm going to get my laptop. I did actually have to buy a new laptop to do this podcast because my old laptop was from when I was in college, and it takes about 30 minutes to get into the thing and then do any work on it. So I knew I needed a laptop, right? I, at this point, still don't know how to post a podcast, and I still don't have a name for my podcast or an intro for it. I don't have a yearly podcast plan. I have a few ideas of what I want to talk about, but I don't know the whole plan. And that used to terrify the heck out of me. That would stop me from literally starting anything in my life, and it stopped me for a long time from switching careers, from exploring new hobbies, from a lot of different things. But the more that I just start lately, the more that I just use messy action to my advantage, the happier I've been and the further that I've gotten with all of my goals. So if there's anything that you can take away from this podcast, it's that. And it's just to get started, to figure out what the first step that you can do is, and just go for it. And I'm just going to figure out how to post this thing when I finish. So I'm so glad that you joined me for my first podcast. I have some ideas of some things that I want to dive into in the future here. I love podcasts. They're one of my favorite forms of consuming content. I like to listen to them while I'm driving, while I'm cleaning, things like that. It's really different from what I get to talk about on Instagram with short form content. So if you're probably coming from my Instagram if you're listening to this. But if you're not, you can find me on Instagram at LindsaySherman_fitness. Also on Facebook at Lindsay Sherman Fitness. And I post all kinds of things over there. I post daily on my stories and pretty much daily on my feed as well. All about nutrition, fitness coaching, burnout. I post when I have openings for one-on-one coaching and different programs coming up. It is the end of September when I'm recording this, so I'm currently planning a challenge coming in October and then some Black Friday deals coming in November. So that's really exciting. So I'm so glad that you've come to listen. I don't know how to wrap up a podcast. Can you tell? I'm just rambling here. But I will see you in the next one. All right. Bye-bye.